Restless, Volume 1. Space is vast and untamed, and it holds many secrets. Now, two individuals from opposite ends of settled space are on a collision course with the darkest of those secrets, even as the world threatens to explode around them. Or they will be, in about 8 years. Restless is a short story prequel to Starshine, Book 1 of the Aurora Rising trilogy. Before Alex Solovy was a successful interstellar scout, she was building starships and planning for the day when she would fly one she called her own. Before Caleb Marano was wiping out the terrorist group who murdered his mentor, he was wiping out terrorist groups who murdered shopkeepers and threatened his friends. Catch a glimpse of Aurora Rising's heroes while they were still becoming the individuals they will need to be in order to face the galactic threat which, for now, waits silently in the void. 2314, 8 years before the events of Starshine. Earth, San Francisco. I quit. Alex Solovy rolled the words around in her mind, trying out different inflections and intonations and generally letting her brain grow comfortable with the notion, not so much the words themselves as what they signified. Freedom, in all its wondrous and terrifying splendor. She was on pleasant terms with her boss at Pacifica Aerodynamics, if not necessarily her coworkers, and bore him and the enterprise he operated no particular ill will. The opposite, in fact. It was a decent company as companies went, inasmuch as it hadn't allowed 2 centuries' worth of ship fabrication to weigh it down or stifle an innovative spirit. No, unlike so many legions of corporate drones, she wasn't quitting because she hated her job. She was quitting because the job had always been nothing more than a means to an end, a way to gain a fulsome understanding of and skill in operating every conceivable system to be found on a starship, plus each one's variations, quirks, and maintenance requirements. 2 years before, she had left IS Design on Irison because she had learned everything they had to teach her. Now she would leave Pacifica Aerodynamics for the same reason. Seeing as they were the 2 premier civilian starship manufacturers in the Earth Alliance, the only place where she could learn the remaining, and the most important, lessons was space itself. She had also spent the previous 4 years of gainful employment, saving every spare credit to pass through her account. Never one to spend frivolously on consumer trappings, she had trimmed her expenses to the bone by sharing a flat with Kennedy while on Irison, and, upon returning to San Francisco, renting a modest 1-bedroom apartment in a once-and-not-yet-again trendy neighborhood. The savings had built up quickly, albeit not so quickly as her innate restlessness might have liked, and now 95% of those savings had been spent on a ship of her own. Her ship. She let those words roll around exquisitely in her mind as she went to break the good news to her boss. Seneca, Cavare, capital of the Senecan Federation. Caleb Marano flattened himself against the wall and readied the daemon at his hip. From the other side of the entrance, Samuel counted down the seconds with his fingers. When the last finger dropped, Samuel activated the door and they stormed into the room. A makeshift office containing only a collapsible desk sitting askew and cartons stacked along both walls, the setting carried all the hallmarks of shady and transient criminal activity. Pascal Abelli, you are under arrest for blackmail and extortion of a government official. You may... I don't think so. Abelli drew his own daemon as footsteps pounded down the hallway behind them. The investigation had fallen to the Division of Intelligence because there was some question as to whether a government official, Interior Director Orsi DeCampo, had in truth engaged in the crime Abelli was blackmailing him to keep secret, selling Federation secrets to the Trian cartel. If the director had not done so, the pertinent question became how classified material had found its way into Pascal Abelli's hands. Samuel shot Abelli before the gun made it halfway up. Caleb stayed by the entrance, waited a beat, then threw an elbow backwards to smash the face of the guard who burst through the doorway, knocking the man flat on his back as blood gushed from a crushed nasal septum. He spun and fired as the guard tried to get up, confiscated the man's gun and tossed it to Samuel. Next, he crouched to search the now unconscious form for other weapons. Laser fire streaked above his head. He lunged forward to tackle the second guard at the knees when the opposite wall turned red and a spray of blood propelled out of the hole burned through the man's chest. The body collapsed to the floor. After Caleb checked to confirm the hallway harbored no further attackers, he climbed to his feet and found Samuel lowering the gun Caleb had tossed to him, his personal shield sparking with residual energy dissipation. "Guess his gun wasn't set to stun, and I thought I might actually get to finish this op without having to kill anyone. When was the last time that happened? Too long ago to remember, seems like." Samuel flipped Abeli's prone body onto his stomach and secured his arms and wrist restraints. "The guy's a lard ass. Help me drag him out?" Caleb wiped stray blood off his cheek using his shirt before grabbing hold of the unconscious man's left arm. Together they hauled him past the 2 guards and down the hallway. "Thanks for tagging along with me tonight. Turns out I did need the backup. Logistics ought to be here by the time we get outside. I'd invite you to go get a beer or 4, but I suspect I'm going to be ass-deep in red tape for hours. Killing politicians, their friends, or even their enemies always means mountains of bureaucracy." A beer or 4 would serve well to calm the adrenaline still coursing hot through Caleb's veins and the agitated energy which inevitably lingered longer than it should after such confrontations. But there was more than one way to appease the restlessness. "It's all good. I've got plans on Romaine later." Plans was perhaps a strong word, but Samuel didn't need to know that. "Next time?" Samuel grunted as they lugged Abeli around another corner. "Next time it is." Irison, Earth Alliance Colony. "Are you ready?" "For fuck's sake, Ken, I've been waiting a month for the ship to be finished. I am beyond ready." Kennedy Rossi rolled her eyes as they approached one of the hangar bays at IS Design's production facility. "I just don't want you to faint when you see it or anything." "I've never fainted in my life. Why on earth would I faint now?" "Well?" Kennedy entered a code on the panel beside the interior bay entrance and let the door slide open. Alex crossed the threshold, at which point all other thoughts vacated her mind as her perception narrowed, transfixed by the vision exposed before her. The ship gleamed a charcoal 2 shades from black, all curves and edges. The broad midsection flared out to expansive wings which housed, or would soon house, a plethora of instruments and sensors. From an aesthetic viewpoint, the silhouette resembled an Indian black eagle preparing to swoop upon its prey. Her gaze ran bow to stern and back again. Though a small vessel by any objective measure, here in the hangar it loomed large and powerful to dominate its environs. "You're blocking the door, Alex." "I know I'm blocking the door. Give me a minute." She had to credit the engineers. She had provided them a design, and they brought it to life more vividly than it had ever existed in her imagination. A grin spread across her face as she, at last, approached the ship. "You would not believe how much grumbling I caught from, well, everyone on the project. 'Nobody makes a ship like this. We'll never fit slots for so many instruments on the frame. I've never even heard of this material.' On and on it went." Alex ignored her to run a hand along the hull, following it all the way to the S-loom drive suspended beneath a gracefully tapered tail section. Though faster than 80% of civilian drives, it was a previous generation model and the most she could afford right now. Everything was designed with an affinity toward continual, iterative transformation, though, and if all went according to plan, she'd be able to upgrade it soon enough. This was the case for many of the onboard components. Solid, quality, last-gen equipment she intended would one day be replaced by the state-of-the-art. But the ship holding them was one of a kind. She traced the hull to the hatch. Already keyed to her, it opened at her touch. She was vaguely cognizant of Kennedy trailing her up the ramp, then rather more cognizant of it when she halted at the top and Kennedy bumped into her and sent her skidding into the cabin. She stood silently in the center of the cabin for several seconds. Then she was laughing and twirling around in the cavernous open space like a carefree child. "Ken, look! This is amazing!" Her best friend leaned against the cabin wall to watch the rare display of exuberance and amusement. "So, it's what you wanted. Well, I need to run diagnostics on the mechanical systems and confirm the HUD layout and test all the modules against my specs, and I hope like hell the engineering core's wiring isn't a complete disaster." She glanced at Kennedy to find her wearing a mock glare. "But, yes, it's exactly what I wanted. It's everything I wanted. Thank you." "You are most welcome, but we hardly worked gratis. You paid my company bucket loads of credit for it. True, but those bucket loads were a scintilla above cost, so I'll double down on the thank you. I could not have commissioned this ship if it had included a retail markup. You've given the designers here some clever ideas to pursue. I predict we will soon recoup the initial loss in profit. Alex scrutinized the main cabin once more before arching an eyebrow. Want to go somewhere? Take her for a test run? Kennedy made a show of considering the question. Only if we go somewhere with top-shelf shopping. I need new shoes. Lots of new shoes. Well, I'm broke now, so I'll be a poor shopping partner. That's fine. I don't require an enabler. I'll do plenty of buying for both of us. Alex pondered it a moment. Romaine? Kennedy's face lit up. Romaine. Romaine, Independent Colony. Caleb, this is a surprise. Mia Rakelme's lips curled into an expression somewhere between delight and anticipation. A pleasant one, naturally. He placed a kiss at her temple, then stepped a respectful distance away, as they had an audience. How are you? It's been a few months. I'm good. I signed a lease last week on a new retail location. I'm expanding the store. She gestured at the cramped, cluttered space to emphasize the necessity of the act. He wasn't surprised. It had taken her a few months to get her feet under her after arriving on Romaine, but once she had, it was off to the races. In less than 5 years, she had gone from renting a cubbyhole behind a flat in a 5-room apartment, from trading second-hand gear in the flea market, to owning a custom tech shop in an upscale neighborhood. And he suspected she was barely getting started. Mia checked the 2 customers browsing her shelves, then leaned in close to murmur in his ear. I'm devastated to say I can't leave for another 5 hours. I only have part-time help, and said help is currently on vacation. He chuckled. She had obviously deduced why he was here. Well, I don't. Mia's eyes darted to the entrance, her expression darkening. He turned to see what had distracted her. A man hovered a step inside the store. His scruffy appearance and grungy clothes set him apart from not only the other customers, but everyone in a 6-block radius. They marked him as a thug. Caleb demanded the entrant's attention with his eyes and held it hostage with a sharp, silent stare. The man balked under the scrutiny. He glared at Mia and departed. So anyway... What just happened? Nothing. As I was saying... Mia... She blew out an exasperated breath. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Now he demanded her attention, though in a far softer manner. Are you in some kind of trouble? Not at all. I can take care of myself. I know you can. So tell me what it was about. She drew him to the rear wall of the shop, farther from her customer's hearing. He's an enforcer for this upstart local gang. They've gotten it into their heads they're going to run a protection racket. She sighed in blatant disgust. Even here, at the center of a pillar of our civilization, there are still goons and delinquents lurking in the shadows. Are you paying them? No, but... I'm starting to think it may be better for me to simply do so and then be done with it. Her gaze slid away as she shifted her weight from one leg to the other, her arms crossed over her chest. They're low-rent scum, but they have muscle. They've gotten violent against several of the more recalcitrant store owners. 2 have ended up in the hospital, and the last person who said no more than twice ended up dead. Okay, that's it. He pivoted toward the door, but was halted by her hand grasping his wrist. Caleb, please don't. This isn't your fight. The police are investigating, and if they don't handle it, I will. Mia, this is what I do. Let me help you. Dark irises glittered beneath long lashes pinched tight. The intensity of the look reminded him she was indeed a formidable woman. You've already helped me enough for 2 lifetimes, given me the capacity to live a life of my own, and I adore you for it. But you've done enough. She studied his face. Do you hear me? He nodded with an air of thoughtfulness, careful to project the impression he was taking her words to heart. I hear you. Just watch yourself, will you? She smiled broadly, breaking the somber mood. Always. He forced a devilish smirk. "So 5 hours, huh? All right, I'll make myself scarce." He drew her close and his lips found her ear. "I'll come by later tonight. You haven't moved your apartment, have you?" "No, but who said I want you to come by tonight? Maybe I have a date." "Then I'll come by after your date." His teeth grazed her neck as she pulled back to find a glint in her eye he recognized as assent. With a casual wave, he left her to her customers and headed out. Kennedy's shopping bags were jammed under their patio table. Empty plates sat discarded to the side, a nearly empty bottle of Shiraz in the center. They took turns devouring an enormous slice of cheesecake, drizzled in raspberries, as the sky began darkening to a cool lavender. Romaine's 2 sons made for a very long, if most lovely, evening. "So, what are your initial plans for this new venture?" Alex enjoyed savoring her bite of cheesecake before answering. "I have an appointment first of the week with the R&D director of Swiren about mining for nanodiamonds in NGC 2027, and one the next day with a rep from the Gagarin Institute about scouting M10 for potentially habitable worlds." "You don't waste any time, do you?" "Hell no. I've been preparing for this opportunity my whole life. I am ready to get on with it." "And you won't get lonely, out there by yourself, in the void for weeks at a stretch?" "Wait, what am I saying? This is you we're talking about." She paused to take another bite and wipe away the raspberry sauce left behind on her chin. "So, did you tell your mother you left Pacifica to go freelance?" Alex scowled over the top of her glass of Shiraz. "As if she would care. She's a newly minted admiral and on the short list to be the next EASC Director of Operations." "So?" "Yes, I sent her a message. In vintage Miriam Solovy fashion, she responded that she hoped I understood I bore the responsibility for my own foolish choices." "Well, nope. Sorry, can't defend her on this one. You've worked your ass off for 4 years, for a decade if you count earning multiple degrees, so you could make your dream a reality. She should respect what you've accomplished." Alex didn't dispute the truth of the statement, although she did swallow a brief disquiet when Kennedy paid the check. She'd feel bad about it, except for the fact that while she wasn't quite broke by the most technical definition, the ship had eradicated her savings, and she didn't have a proper job, or any clients. Not yet. So she decided not to feel bad about it. She and Kennedy had traded implicit debts, which never needed to be repaid, yet always were, more times than she dared count over the years. This debt, too, was sure to come back around again, eventually. The instant Caleb exited Mia's store, his demeanor transformed. He traded the relaxed gait for a careful, alert posture and the friendly countenance for a cool mask. It did not surprise him to see the enforcer exit a store 3 doors down a moment later. The man was making his scheduled rounds. When his target continued on, he followed. The sidewalk ferried a busy flow of young professionals out after work and tourists pursuing the shops and restaurants. The thug's distinctly unkempt appearance made him easy to track from a distance. A line spilled out of a particularly popular Chinesian grill restaurant on the next corner. An expansive outdoor patio decorated in wrought iron and blooming Elise blended into an open-air interior, and the place bustled with energy. In another circumstance, he'd likely have wandered inside for stir-fry and a cold beer. As he slipped past the busy entrance, someone tripped into him. He stiffened, keeping the stranger at a safe distance until he realized the person was merely inebriated beyond public decency. He tried to stabilize the young man, but his efforts were for naught when the guy stumbled to the ground. Caleb stepped away to avoid the prone figure and immediately bumped into someone else. Golden curls whipped past him as he muttered, "Excuse me." "Not a problem." At the sound of the rich, almost sultry voice, he instinctively glanced back. The golden curls belonged to an attractive, poised young woman and were promptly forgotten when beyond her he caught a glimpse of tresses the color of fine Bordeaux and a flash of startlingly bright silver-gray eyes. The sight was enough to hitch his gait for half a step, to overwhelm his mission for a frozen frame of time. Then she was gone, and he resumed his tale. The waitress cleared away the dessert plates, and Kennedy gathered her bags up. Alex frowned as they wound into the restaurant from the patio and navigated a growing crowd near the exit. "You seriously need to be on Arison by first thing in the morning?" "I do. I have to work." "You've been job-free for all of a day. Surely you remember what working means." "Sosiego y pasa croy, suka." Right. Next thing I know, you're going to want to sleep in the big bed. First night in my shiny, brand-new ship, and I'm bunking on the guest cot. Now that you mention it, I do need to be well-rested and refreshed for work in the morn. Kennedy jostled into Alex's side, pushed by someone bumping into her as they exited the busy doorway. "Excuse me." The deep, lilting voice resonated between the buzz of the patrons, sending a sensual tremor fluttering along Alex's spine. Taken aback by the unexpected visceral response, she blinked and forcibly shook it off. "Not a problem." Kennedy's focus lingered over her shoulder as they reached the sidewalk. "He was handsome in a rugged, rock-my-world-for-a-weekend sort of way." "Oh, whatever. Come on, there's a tech gear shop on the next block I want to check out." "I thought you were broke." "This is why they invented credit. I'm investing in my ship." "Clearly. Speaking of, have you decided what you're going to name her?" A whimsical smile grew to brighten Alex's features as they strolled down the sidewalk in the slowly fading light. "Oh, yes." Several blocks past the restaurant, the ambiance of the area began to shift. Meter by meter, it became shabbier, darkening in sync with the evening sky. The crowd thinned and was replaced by working class, then barely working class inhabitants. Finally, Caleb's opportunity came. He increased his pace to draw near to his prey. As the enforcer crossed an alley between two shabby tenements, he sprang, forcing the man down the alley, deep into the shadows and far from prying bystanders, and shoving his head into the stone. Yanking the right arm up at an awkward angle flushed against the man's back, he held it at the end of its range of motion for a beat, then thrust it upward from the elbow. The man screamed in pain as the bone ripped out of the elbow and shoulder sockets, and the tendons tore apart. The other arm flailed at Caleb. He pinned it high on the wall, knifed his hand, and slammed it forward. The crack was audible as the man's forearm fractured under the blow. In the next motion, he wrenched his captive around and got in his face. "You are going to take me to the leaders of your little gang, and you are going to do it now." Beads of sweat drizzled down greasy skin, doubtless triggered by what must be fairly intense pain, if not fear. "I can't." "Don't talk. Don't sputter out a solitary protest, or it will be your last. Take me to them." "Who the fuck are you?" Caleb palmed the man's forehead and slammed his skull against the wall. "I said, don't talk. And you want to do as I say because I'm the one thing monsters like you and your kind fear. I'm what haunts your nightmares and hunts you in the darkness. Now move." The man's head jerked wildly, slinging greasy sweat in Caleb's direction. He wiped the fluid off his chin, then grabbed the arm flopping limply at his captive's side and pointed to the street. Their destination lay a few short blocks further to the west, which was probably for the best, because his charge was not holding up well. He groaned and moaned and eventually begged for Caleb to punch him hard enough to render him unconscious. Caleb kept driving him forward. When they stepped through the door to the hideout, he tossed his captive to the side and drew his daemon. 3 men sat around a table. All were muscled and similarly greasy, and easily identifiable as scum. As he breached the entrance, all 3 were moving, drawing their own guns in surprise. Only one got off a shot. Caleb had put a laser through the skulls of the other 2 before their arms had fully raised. The 3rd man wore a minimal personal shield and weathered Caleb's first volley to return fire. The shots bounced harmlessly off his own shield. He advanced while firing into the gangster's chest. The laser overloaded the cheap shield to blow the man's chest open. Ozone permeated the air to scorch his nostrils. He stood silently in the center of the room and allowed the scene to settle to its conclusion. The body collapsed to the floor to join its companions, leaving the far wall free to reveal its glory tableau. The sound of glass cracking followed the thud of the corpse. A display panel on the desk, behind the bodies, grazed by the gunfire, teetered and fell. Another breath, in and out, and he was moving. After checking for immediate threats, he went over to where the panel had landed. A visual flickered, distorted by the damaged display, but he discerned a woman and a small boy. The woman was pretty, in a mildly trashy way, sporting a crooked grin and 2 blonde hair. The boy looked 3 or 4 and clearly favored his mother. All the adrenaline abandoned him in a rush, leaving his shoulders sagging and the gun dangling from his hand. They were thugs and bullies and murderers. They preyed on the weak and stole from those who worked rather than work themselves. They used fear as a weapon to impose their will on others, and they had pointed guns at him. Yet a traitorous voice in his mind whispered that he had provoked the encounter. He had stormed into their lair, gun drawn. Yes, they would have killed him, but in the present situation perhaps only because he would have done, and did, the same to them. Caleb didn't know which of the dead men the woman was attached to, or which might be the father of the boy. For an instant, it was the only question that mattered. He snatched the display off the floor, spun on a heel, and strode to the enforcer who had brought him here, now sprawled in a pile on the floor. He crouched and nudged him onto his back without a response. The man had passed out. Annoyed, Caleb slapped him awake. As soon as an eyelid opened, he grabbed the man's shirt and lifted him up to shove the display in his face. "Do you know this woman?" He nodded vaguely, eyes bleary and unfocused. "What is her name?" Tamitha Baker." Caleb buried the tumult he had briefly allowed it to flare, and his bearing took on an uncanny stillness. He smiled. "This is your lucky day. You get to leave, on one condition, so listen carefully. Your sole purpose from this day forward is to watch over Tamitha and her son, and make certain neither of them come to harm. Use your meager, pathetic skills to protect them. Do you understand me?" The man's eyes widened until they were all whites. A bead of sweat rolled down his forehead and merged with a trickle of blood to weave down his cheek and splatter onto his shirt. He nodded again, more definitively this time. "If you fail in this task, I will know, and I will come back and end your life as effortlessly as I ended theirs. Remember that whenever you start thinking you can slack off." He stared at the man another second to guarantee the message had been received, then dropped him to the floor and stood. "I'll send the paramedics and the cops in a few minutes. Make sure you don't get yourself arrested. Can't do your job from prison." Why did you kill them?" Caleb laughed, and even he recognized it bore a frightening coldness. "Because you walked through the wrong door, and they paid you to do it. Mirakelmi is off limits. You will be a testament to the terror that arrives the moment you or anyone else crosses the invisible line you didn't know existed until tonight. Spread the word." Irison, Earth Alliance Colony. The Sion banked to soar above snow-capped mountains as the dawn sun glittered off the powdery crystals. The sky shone a perfect turquoise blue. Alex had deposited Kennedy at the spaceport moments earlier, somewhat less refreshed and well-rested than requested. But it had been an enjoyable night. She stifled a yawn as she gained altitude and approached the nearest atmosphere corridor, but a smile replaced it. A couple of minutes remained for her to decide her destination once she hit space. It was a subversive notion, the idea that she was free to choose where to go and what to do with her time. She wasn't a gold-bricker. She intended to run a business and had crucial appointments the next week she intended to keep. But at the conclusion of those appointments, she would choose to take the jobs or not. If she took the jobs, she would choose how best to fulfill the contracts. The path between the agreement and the delivery was hers to chart. She would succeed or fail on her own merits. Her rise or fall would be of her own making. Until then, she had 6 days to herself. Nothing but her ship and the expanse of space to distract her. The ship exited the atmosphere corridor, the sky darkened to onyx, and the stars brightened to opalescent ivory. Her father's words from so long ago echoed in her mind. "Sion is perfect, sweetheart, my little star shining brightly. One day, Malaya, the cosmos will be yours to tame. One day you will hold the galaxy in the palm of your hand. I know it. She killed the lights in the cabin and stood to take in the view as the fullness of space spread before her, her head tilted in contemplation. Could she make it to Karina and get back to Earth in 6 days? She double-checked the parameters on the S-Loom drive. Yep, she absolutely could. 6 days round trip for a spectacular view? Worth it. Now clear of Irison traffic control, she ran a quick safety check, then engaged the S-Loom drive. The stars blurred away to surround the ship in a soft halo. Hey, Dad, I made it. I made it to the stars.